A hand closed around her throat in the middle of the street. Her feet left the ground. Her back slammed into brick hard enough to knock the breath out of her. People kept walking past on the sidewalk. Nobody stopped. Nobody even looked. The man holding her was bigger than any human had a right to be. Thick shoulders. Crew cut. Eyes the wrong color for a face like that. He leaned in close and sniffed her hair once. Then he froze. His grip loosened just enough for her toes to find the ground. He whispered something into her ear that made the blood drain out of her face. The woman everyone had known for 10 years as Mara Vance felt the last decade of her life crack in half. What did this stranger know about her that nobody else was supposed to know? Stay with me on this one. He let her go. Just like that. Her body slid down the brick and her knees almost gave out under her. He took one step back, looked at her for another long second, said 3 more words. Don't run far. Then he walked off into the crowd like nothing had happened at all. People kept moving around her on the sidewalk like she was a stain they didn't want to step in. She stood there with her hand pressed flat against her throat and her heart doing something it hadn't done in 10 years. It was racing the way only her real heart could race. Not the slow, steady, careful rhythm she'd trained it into. The other one. The one she had been hiding. Now here's the thing you need to understand about Mara Vance. There was no Mara Vance. There never had been. The driver's license in her wallet was a forgery good enough to fool every cop and every banker in the city. The lease on her apartment was in that name. The job at the public library was in that name. The friendly nods to her neighbors. The Christmas cards she sent to people she barely knew. All of it was Mara Vance. Underneath that name was a woman called Lyra. Lyra of a bloodline that was not supposed to still exist. A bloodline that her own kind had hunted to the ground because of something that had happened before she was born. She was the only one left. And she had spent every day of the last 10 years pretending to be the one thing she absolutely was not. Human. Believe me when I tell you, hiding what you are is not a single decision. It's 1,000 decisions a day. It's the way you breathe, the way you eat, the way you smile when somebody says something that should have made you growl. It's washing yourself in herbs nobody else can buy because they don't grow on this continent. It's the small glass vial she kept in her purse at all times, full of something that smelled like wet earth and bitter root. She used a drop behind each ear every morning. That drop was the only reason she was alive. Wolves can smell what you are. Not human wolves. Real ones. The kind that walk around on 2 legs most of the time but are not even close to being people. They can smell bloodline. They can smell power. They can smell fear. And the vial in her purse covered all 3. For 10 years it had worked. 10 years of nobody looking at her twice. 10 years of buying groceries and paying rent and reading library books on her lunch break. 10 years of being so boring, so ordinary, so absolutely without scent, that even another wolf could walk past her on the sidewalk and not blink. Until today. She walked home. She did not run. He had told her not to run far, and she didn't know what far meant, but she knew running would tell him something about her he could already smell. So she walked. Slow. Steady. Eyes down. In her apartment, she locked the door behind her and slid the deadbolt and pressed her back against the wood and finally let herself shake. She let herself shake for about 30 seconds. Then she stopped. Shaking was a luxury she couldn't afford. She went to the bathroom mirror and pulled her collar down. There were bruises forming on her throat already. 5 fingers. Big ones. She studied them like she was reading a map. The bruises told her how big his hand was. The bruises told her how much strength he had used and how much he had held back. He had not been trying to hurt her. He had been trying to hold her in place long enough to confirm what he already suspected. He had confirmed it. She knew 3 things now. She knew he was a wolf. She knew he was high in the order, because no low wolf had the nerve to grab a stranger off the street in broad daylight. And she knew he knew her real name, which meant he knew her bloodline, which meant her 10 years of careful, quiet, invisible life were already over. They had ended the second his fingers closed on her throat. She just hadn't caught up to it yet. She started to pack a bag. She didn't get far. She got 2 blocks. Maybe 3. 2 men in long coats stepped out of a doorway, and that was that. They didn't grab her. They didn't have to. One of them said her real name out loud on a public sidewalk, and she stopped walking. The other one held the back door of a black car open and waited. She got in. They didn't drive long. 20 minutes. Out of the city, up into the hills where the trees got thick and the houses got hidden behind long driveways. The lodge they took her to was not a lodge. It was a fortress dressed up as a hunting cabin. Stone walls, iron gates, men with watching eyes standing at the corners. Inside, the air smelled wrong. Not bad. Wrong. It smelled like her own kind, in numbers she hadn't been around since she was 12 years old. The vial in her purse couldn't begin to cover it. They walked her down a hallway lined with stags' heads and old paintings. They opened a door at the end of the hall. He was waiting for her in front of a window, hands clasped behind his back. The same crew cut, the same thick neck. He turned when she came in. The 2 men in coats closed the door behind her and stayed outside. He said, "Sit down, Lyra." She did not sit down. "You know my name," she said. Her voice came out steadier than she expected. "Who told you?" "Nobody told me. I smelled you on the sidewalk." She felt something cold and clean run down her spine. "I was masked." "You were masked enough to fool anyone who wasn't looking for you." "I have been looking for you." She did not ask why. She knew why. Her bloodline had been a problem long before she was born, and the problem had not gone away just because the bloodline had hidden itself. She had been preparing for this conversation since she was 12 years old. She just had not expected it to happen on a Tuesday afternoon at the corner of a regular street. He told her his name then, Kale, Alpha King of the territories west of the river, which meant he was not just any wolf. He was the wolf, the one who decided who lived and who didn't. He told her she had 2 choices. Choice 1 was that the council found out she still existed, and the council did to her what they had done to her father and her grandmother and her uncle and every other person who had ever shared her blood. Choice 1 was a clean ending and a quiet grave. Choice 2 was that she stopped existing as Lyra of the severed line and started existing as something else. Something the council could not touch. Something they would not even be allowed to ask about. She would have to be marked. Now I need to slow down and tell you what that word means in this world. A mark is not a tattoo. A mark is not a wedding ring. A mark is a wound that does not heal and a vow that does not break. When an alpha marks somebody, he is telling every other wolf on the continent that this person belongs to his line. Not as a slave, not as a wife, as a piece of him. A piece that other wolves are not allowed to touch under penalty of death. Marks were old. Marks were sacred. Marks were almost never given to anyone outside the strongest bloodlines. He was offering her a mark. She stared at him for a long time. He stared back. He did not look away. "Why?" she said. "Because the council is moving on your line again. They have been moving for 6 months. I have been chasing your scent for 4. If I find you first and I mark you, you become mine and not theirs. If they find you first, you become a body. And what do you get out of this?" He almost smiled. "Not quite. We can talk about that later." She thought about it. She thought about running. She thought about the vial in her purse and how it would not save her now. She thought about the fact that she had been alone for 10 years and was about to stop being alone in a way she could never undo. She thought about her father, whose face she could barely remember anymore, and her grandmother, who had hidden her in a grain bin once for 2 whole days while men with silver knives walked back and forth above her head. She sat down. He came around the desk. He sat down across from her. He took her hand. He turned it over and looked at her wrist for a long moment. Then he leaned in slow, very slow, and he set his teeth against the soft skin just below her shoulder, and he bit her. It hurt. Believe me, it hurt. But the pain was the smallest part of what happened. What happened was that something inside her, Something that had been buried under 10 years of vile drops and trained breathing and pretending to be small woke up. It woke up the way a fire wakes up when you finally throw kerosene on it. Her wolf came up out of her chest like an animal that had been waiting in a cage for a long time, and the mark held it there, half in and half out, neither hidden nor free. He pulled back. His eyes were a different color now. Hers, she suspected, were a different color too. "There," he said. "It's done." She breathed. She breathed all the way down to the bottom of her lungs for the first time in a decade. "It's done," she said back. He poured her a glass of water from a pitcher on the desk. He set it in front of her. He told her to rest. He told her he would come back in an hour. He left the room and closed the door behind him. She sat alone in the quiet for a long time. She picked up the water. She drank it. Her hand was steady. The hum of the lodge moved around her, low and almost gentle. Somewhere in the building a clock chimed once. She closed her eyes. The mark on her shoulder was warm and the warmth was almost kind. It was over. That's what she thought. The door opened. It wasn't Cale. 3 men walked into the room without knocking. They did not look at her like she was a person. They looked at her like she was a ledger entry that needed correcting. The one in front was old. White hair, dark eyes, a coat that fit too well to belong to anyone who actually worked for a living. He was carrying a scroll with a wax seal on it. The other 2 were the size of small trucks, and they had silver pinned to their lapels in the shape of a closed fist. The old man set the scroll down on the desk in front of her without saying hello. "You are Lyra of the severed line," he said. "Do not waste my time pretending you are not." She did not pretend. There was no point. The mark on her shoulder was so fresh it was still bleeding through the fabric. He pointed at the scroll. "This is a sealed writ from the Inner Council. Commands your removal from these lands by sundown." Removal. You understand what that word means in our language. She understood. Now here's where the ground shifted under her. What had been a private thing between her and Cale was suddenly a public thing. What had been one wolf's choice had just collided with 7 generations of law. She had thought she was hiding from one enemy. She had not even seen the enemy behind the enemy. The council was older than any Alpha King. The council did not care about marks. The council did not care about love. The council cared about the law, and the law said her line was supposed to be in the ground. The old man waited. He thought she was going to argue. He thought she was going to plead. People always did. He had seen 10 generations of pleading, and he was patient with it. She did not plead. She looked at the scroll. She looked at the wax seal. She looked at the 2 large men with silver fists on their coats. And she stood up. "My mark is fresh," she said. Her voice was quiet. "You will need to discuss this with the Alpha who placed it. The Alpha who placed it had no authority to place it. You are not eligible for marking under council law. You are a corpse who has been allowed to walk for too long." "Then go find a corpse," she said. "Because I am not one." He smiled at her then. It was the worst smile she had ever seen. There was nothing happy in it. It was the smile of a man who has been told something funny by a sheep about to be slaughtered. He nodded at the 2 enforcers. They moved. "Now I want you to understand something about Lyra. The decade of pretending to be human had not just been a costume. It had cost her things. It had cost her her wolf's edge, her speed, her reflexes. She had spent so long teaching her body to be slow that, when the first enforcer's hand closed around her arm, she could not pull free. He dragged her toward the door. The second enforcer was unrolling a length of silver chain. She thought very calmly, this is how it ends after all. 10 years of careful breathing. 10 years of vile drops. And it ends in a hallway with a chain around my neck. Her brain ran through it. Her brain made peace with it. The wolf inside her, freshly woken, freshly marked, did not make peace with it. The wolf was not slow. The wolf had been sleeping, not aging. And the wolf opened its eyes. The first enforcer made a sound that was not quite a word. He looked down. Lyra's hand was on his wrist. The fingers were not human. The nails were not human. They were buried half an inch into his skin, and they were not letting go. He dropped her arm. He stepped back. His own hand was bleeding. The old man's smile slid sideways off his face for the first time in 20 years. The second enforcer brought up the silver chain. He swung it at her head. The chain made a noise as it cut the air. She did not duck. She caught it with her hand. The silver burned her palm in a long red line, but she did not let go, and she pulled. The enforcer came with the chain. She put him on the ground. She did not bite him. She wanted to. Believe me, she wanted to. But the wolf was new and the mark was new, and she did not know yet what she was capable of. She held him there with her knee on his chest and her hand on his throat, and she said one sentence. "Get up off my floor." That was the first real moment in 10 years that Lyra had been herself in front of strangers. Her hands were shaking when it was over, but it was a clean shake. A coming home shake. If you're still with me on this story, do me one small favor. Hit that subscribe button. Tap the bell. These take time to tell right, and the rest of this one is the part you really want to stay for. The first enforcer was bleeding. The second one was on the carpet. The old man with the scroll was standing very still by the desk. Nobody in the room was moving. The door opened a second time. Cale walked in. He stopped in the doorway and looked at the two men on the ground and the scroll on the desk and the old man with the bad smile that was no longer a smile. His face did something then. Something quiet. Something that I would not want to be on the receiving end of. He looked at Lyra. He said, "Step back from him. I'll handle this." She stepped back. The enforcer rolled away coughing. The old man straightened his coat and started to speak, and Cale held up one finger, and the old man stopped speaking. Cale walked over to the desk. He picked up the scroll. He read the wax seal. He read the first line. He set the scroll back down, and then he tore it in half. The old man went very still. "You don't have the authority," he said. "I am the authority," Cale said. "The council has overstepped." Cale's voice was quiet. It was so quiet that the men on the floor stopped breathing for a second to hear it. "You walked into my home. You walked into my chambers. You put hands on a woman who carries my mark. 3 things. Each one of them on its own is enough to end you. You did all 3 before lunch." The old man tried to speak. He could not, all of a sudden, find his voice. He had been talking down to wolves for 40 years, and his voice had always come when he called for it. This time it did not come. Cale walked around the desk. He stood between Lyra and the old man. "Tell me who sent you." "The inner council." "Names." The old man hesitated. The hesitation cost him. Cale moved. "I will not pretend I can describe it for you the way it happened. Wolves at that level do not move the way people move." 1 second Cale was standing in front of the desk. The next second he was holding the old man by the front of his too-good coat, and the old man's feet were off the ground. The 2 enforcers tried to get up. One was still bleeding from his wrist. The other was still on his knees. Lyra watched them try to stand, and she felt something in her chest she had not felt in a long time. She felt like helping, so she did. The bleeding enforcer made it to his feet first. He came at Cale's back. He was fast. Lyra was faster. The decade of slowness fell off her like a coat she had been wearing too long in a hot room. She caught him from behind. She did not bite him. She put both hands on his shoulders and she ran him into the wall. The wall did not win. He slid down it and stayed down. The second enforcer reached into his coat. He came out with a knife. Silver. The kind that is not made for cutting bread. He went for Lyra. Cale was busy with the old man. He could not turn in time. He saw the silver out of the corner of his eye. He shouted her name. The room rang with it. The mark on her shoulder lit up like somebody had pressed a hot coin against her skin. She moved. She moved the way she had not moved since she was 12 years old. The way her grandmother had taught her behind the grain bin one summer afternoon a long, long time ago. She slid under the blade. She came up inside the enforcer's reach. Her shoulder went into his ribs. 3 of them broke. He folded around her. She took the knife out of his hand on the way back up and she dropped it on the carpet. She did not need to do anything else. The enforcer was already on the ground. Cale was watching her over the old man's shoulder. He had stopped moving. He had stopped doing anything. He was just watching her. The look on his face was the look of a man who had marked something and had only just now seen what he had marked. The old man whispered, "She is full blood. She is not weakened. The line is not broken." "No," Cale said. "It is not." The old man started to shake. He had built his whole life around 2 facts. The first fact was that the severed line was dead. The second fact was that the inner council ruled. He had just watched both facts fall over. "You will be hunted," he said. He said it to Lyra, not to Cale. "Every council enforcer on the continent will come for you." "Let them come," Cale said. "They will come for him too," the old man said. And now there was something close to triumph in his voice. The small mean triumph of a man who has nothing left but a threat. "They will come for your alpha. They will come for his territory. They will pull this whole house down." Cale did not answer him. He turned to Lyra instead. "I told you we would talk about what I got out of this later," he said. "This is later. I have been Alpha King for 9 years. For 9 years I have done everything the council told me to do. Their wars, their laws, their executions. I am tired of being their hand. Do you understand?" She did. She understood it down to her bones. "You were not just hiding from them," he said. "I was hiding from them too. In my own way. I was hiding while standing right next to them. I needed something they could not take. They cannot take a mark that has already been placed. They cannot take a mate that has already been claimed. You and I are the one thing they cannot reach. The only one." She looked at him for a long time. The room was full of broken men and broken furniture and a torn scroll on the floor, and she looked at the Alpha King of the Western Territories and she finally understood what he had done. He had not saved her out of mercy. He had not even saved her out of love. Not yet, not really. He had saved her because she was the only person on the continent who could stand next to him against the people he was trying to break free of. The mark went both ways. The mark protected him too. She was not a prize. She was a partner. Maybe the only partner he had ever had. She found, to her own surprise, that she was all right with that. "All right," she said. He nodded. He let go of the old man's coat. The old man dropped to the floor and stayed there. Cale walked over to one of the heavy curtains and pulled the cord. Outside, somewhere in the lodge, a bell began to ring. Then another. Then another. Lyra knew without being told what those bells meant. They meant the war he had been getting ready for was starting now. Today. The minute she had said yes. She had been alone for 10 years. She was not going to be alone anymore. It did not all happen at once. Real things never do. The council did not come that night. They did not come the next night. They came slowly, the way old institutions come, with messengers and edicts and the small daily pressures of an empire that has decided it does not like you. Letters arrived. Banks called. Suppliers stopped delivering. Friends stopped calling. The council did not need to send an army at first. It only needed to send a winter. Cale had been preparing for that winter for years. Lyra learned slowly how deep the preparation went. The lodge was not a lodge. It was a fortress and a granary and a treasury and a barracks all hidden inside a hunting cabin. He had his own men. He had his own coin. He had 100 families across the Western Territories who had quietly grown tired of being told what to do by a council of old men who had not stepped outside in 50 years. The mark on her shoulder was not just protection. It was a signal flare. It told all of those tired families that the time had finally come. They came to her one by one in the weeks after the marking. Not to ask permission. Not to swear oaths. just to look at her. They came to look at the woman who had carried the severed line through the silent decade. The line that the council had said was dead. The line that, it turned out, had been working at the public library all along. Some of them cried when they saw her. Old wolves with white in their hair, who had known her grandmother, who had known her father, who had thought there was nobody left to come back for. She did not know what to do with their crying at first. She had spent 10 years not letting anybody cry near her. She had spent 10 years not letting herself feel anything that was not careful and small. She had to learn how to be looked at. That, more than anything, was the hardest part. Cale was patient with her. He did not push. He did not ask her to be anything other than what she was, which was a woman who had spent the best decade of her young life pretending to be somebody else. He let her wake up. He let her practice. He let her come back to herself slowly, the way a hand wakes up after you have slept on it wrong all night. Pins and needles. Then warmth. Then real feeling. The mark on her shoulder stopped hurting after the 3rd week. It did not fade. Marks do not fade. But it stopped being a wound and started being something else. A weight, maybe. A weight she had chosen to carry. One morning, about 2 months in, she stood in front of the bathroom mirror in the lodge and looked at her own throat. The bruises were long gone. The skin was clean. She tilted her head and looked at the mark on her shoulder for a long time. Then she did something she had not done in 10 years. She threw the vial away. The little glass bottle of wet earth and bitter root. The thing that had kept her alive through every grocery store, every library shift, every Christmas card. She walked it out to the kitchen and she dropped it into the trash and she did not look back. She did not need it anymore. She was not hiding anymore. She did not have to smell like nothing. She could smell like herself. That afternoon she walked outside for the first time without it. The wind picked up her real scent and carried it across the property, and somewhere a long way off, a young wolf she had never met lifted his head from the work he was doing and went still, because he was smelling a bloodline he had only ever heard about in his grandmother's stories. The severed line was back. People felt it before they were told. She and Cale talked in those weeks about everything they had not had time to talk about before. He told her about his 9 years as Alpha King. The deals he had been forced to make. The men he had been forced to bury. The reasons he had been listening for her name for 4 years before he finally found her on a regular sidewalk on a regular Tuesday. She told him about her decade. The vial. The library. The Christmas cards. The Mara Vance who had never been real. He did not laugh at any of it. He understood it all. 2 people had been hiding in plain sight from the same enemy, and now they were not hiding anymore. On the night the first real council force crossed the river into his territory, she stood beside him on the front steps of the lodge in a long coat that fit her properly for the first time in her life. There were 50 wolves at her back. There were 100 more in the trees. She was not afraid. She was not pretending to be ordinary. She was not, for the first time in 10 years, alone. Cale leaned down to her ear. He whispered something. Not the way he had whispered her name on the sidewalk in the city, hard and full of warning. This time it was soft. This time it was a promise. She did not tell anybody what he said. That was for her. She put her hand on his arm. She felt the mark on her shoulder, warm under the wool, warm and steady and absolutely hers. She looked out into the dark trees where the council's men were coming. And the woman everyone had once known as Mara Vance, the boring librarian, the quiet neighbor, the smiling face on the Christmas cards, smiled a different smile this time. It was Lyra's smile. It had been waiting 10 years to come out.